The maintenance tunnels of Outpost Sigma 9 hummed with a monotonous rhythm that Jack Reyes knew better than his own heartbeat. Condensation dripped from corroded pipes, creating a steady percussion against the metal grating beneath his boots. Another day, another endless cycle of checking, cleaning, and repairing the lifeline of this remote mining station, suspended in the cold vacuum of space. Jack's hands moved with practiced efficiency, the carbon scraper gliding across the industrial filter's surface. Microscopic layers of contamination peeled away, revealing the dull metallic sheen underneath. Most would find this work mind-numbingly boring, but Jack found a strange comfort in the predictability. Here, between the machinery and the endless darkness of space, he could forget about the whispers, the rumors about humanity's fractured history. The station's ambient noise shifted subtly. Jack paused, his scraper hovering mid-motion. Something felt different. The air seemed to grow still, charged with an electricity that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. He'd spent years learning to ignore strange sensations, but this was different. A soft shimmer appeared at the edge of his peripheral vision, not the standard holographic warnings or system notifications, but something more substantial, something alive. Jack turned slowly, expecting another maintenance drone or perhaps a station technician. Instead, he found himself face to face with a being that defied everything he understood about existence. She stood nearly 2 feet taller than him, her form both solid and translucent. Luminescent skin shifted with patterns that seemed to tell stories in languages Jack couldn't comprehend. Her eyes, impossibly deep and filled with countless memories, locked directly onto his. No typical alien encounter protocol could have prepared him for this moment. The station's environmental controls continued their steady rhythm. Cooling systems whirred. Distant machinery churned. But in this moment, everything seemed to pause. "Do you remember me, human?" she asked. The words weren't spoken in any traditional sense. They resonated directly within Jack's mind, bypassing his ears, threading through his consciousness with surgical precision. Her voice carried weight, centuries of knowledge, pain, and something that felt remarkably like hope. Jack's training kicked in. Protocol demanded he log the encounter, contact station security, initiate first contact procedures. But his body refused to move. His mind raced through 1,000 potential scenarios, each more impossible than the last. "I don't understand," he managed to whisper, his voice sounding small and fragile against the station's mechanical heartbeat. The luminescent woman, if woman was even an appropriate description, took a step forward. Her movement was liquid grace, defying the station's artificial gravity. Intricate patterns on her skin began to pulse, creating a mesmerizing display that seemed to tell a story older than human civilization. "You are not supposed to remember," she continued, those penetrating eyes never leaving his. "And yet, here we are." Jack's hand unconsciously dropped the carbon scraper. It clattered against the metal grating, the sand explosively loud in the suddenly charged atmosphere. Decades of mundane maintenance work had prepared him for mechanical failures, for equipment breakdowns, for the 1,000 small emergencies that could occur in deep space. Nothing had prepared him for this. Something tugged at the edges of his memory. Fragments. Whispers. Moments that felt like dreams but seemed too precise to be fabrications. The woman, this impossible being, knew something about him, about his past, about humanity's hidden history. "Who are you?" Jack finally asked, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. A hint of what might have been a smile crossed her luminescent features. "I am the keeper of a story you have forgotten. A story that begins with you." Outside the maintenance tunnel's reinforced windows, The vast emptiness of space continued its silent, indifferent dance. Distant stars flickered, unchanged by the extraordinary moment unfolding within the small, insignificant mining station. Jack Reyes stood frozen, understanding that everything he knew about his life was about to change forever. The station's medical bay felt sterile and suffocating. Jack sat motionless on the examination table, his reflection fragmented in the multiple diagnostic screens surrounding him. Station Medical Officer Dr. Elena Rodriguez studied the readouts with increasing confusion, her professional calm barely masking her growing uncertainty. "Your neural patterns are unusual," she muttered, more to herself than to Jack. The luminescent alien woman stood just beyond the medical bay's perimeter, a translucent presence that seemed to exist between reality and imagination. Jack could feel her presence even when he wasn't directly looking at her, a constant, subtle pressure at the edges of his consciousness. Dr. Rodriguez's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "These neural scans show activity patterns I've never seen before in a human subject. It's like multiple memory centers are simultaneously active and dormant." Jack wanted to speak, but words felt inadequate. Fragments of memories began to surface, not like typical recollections, but more like glimpses through a fractured lens. A conference room with star charts, hushed conversations, strategic diagrams that seemed to map entire galactic sectors. The alien woman who had introduced herself as Zara in those first moments of their encounter moved closer. With each step, the medical bay's instruments flickered, their digital displays momentarily distorting. "His genetic markers are responding," Zara said, her voice a telepathic whisper that only Jack could hear. "The first phase of awakening has begun." Dr. Rodriguez didn't seem to hear Zara. Her attention remained fixed on the diagnostic screens, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. These genetic sequences, they're not standard. There are adaptive markers here that shouldn't exist in human DNA. Jack's memories began to bleed together. He saw glimpses of a massive space station, not like the mining outpost he called home, but something far more complex. Humans and various alien species working together in ways that defied current understanding. Strategic planning rooms where the fate of entire civilizations seemed to be discussed with clinical precision. A memory crystallized. A conversation. Voices discussing something called the Stellar Preservation Initiative. "We're not just preserving human life," a voice said. "We're creating a network. A living, adaptive system that can respond to threats we can't even imagine yet." Jack's hands began to tremble. Dr. Rodriguez noticed, her medical training kicking in instantly. "Jack, are you experiencing any pain?" He couldn't answer. The memories were coming faster now. Genetic repositories. Strategic nodes placed across multiple star systems. A plan so complex that its true nature remained hidden even from those implementing it. Zara moved closer, her luminescent form casting no shadow. "Your ancestors were more than survivors," she said. "They were architects of a plan that would span generations." Dr. Rodriguez continued her examination, oblivious to Zara's presence. "Your neural pathways are showing unprecedented connectivity. It's like multiple layers of information are integrated into your basic cognitive structure." Jack saw flashes of training, not military training, but something more nuanced. Strategic thinking courses, psychological conditioning, preparation for a role he hadn't known existed. The mining station was never just a random assignment. Zara continued, her voice a telepathic thread weaving through Jack's consciousness. It was a specific placement, a node in a larger network. Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the memory fragments. "I'm going to need to run more comprehensive tests. These results are unprecedented." Jack's mind reeled. Decades of what he thought was a mundane existence were revealing themselves as carefully orchestrated positioning. Every job, every move, every seemingly random life choice was part of a larger, more intricate design. Zara's eyes held a mixture of anticipation and something that might have been compassion. "You are about to understand your true purpose," she said. "And with that understanding comes a responsibility larger than you can currently comprehend." The medical bay's instruments continued their steady monitoring, recording a transformation they could measure, but never truly understand. Jack Reyes, maintenance worker, unremarkable human, was becoming something entirely different. And his journey was just beginning. The holographic display flickered to life in a hidden compartment of Jack's quarters. Zara stood beside him, her luminescent form casting soft patterns across the room's utilitarian surfaces. What appeared to be a standard maintenance worker's living space now revealed itself as something far more complex. Projected before them was a three-dimensional map of galactic sectors, each point pulsing with intricate networks of connections. Jack watched, mesmerized, as lines of communication formed and dissolved, creating patterns that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The Stellar Preservation Initiative was never about survival in the traditional sense. Zara explained, her telepathic voice weaving through Jack's thoughts. It was a comprehensive strategy of genetic, cultural, and informational preservation. Memories crashed over Jack like waves. He saw glimpses of a conference, brilliant minds from various human departments gathered in a room that seemed to exist outside of conventional time and space. Strategists, geneticists, cultural anthropologists, and quantum theorists worked in a harmony that defied traditional bureaucratic limitations. "We were facing extinction," a voice from his memory spoke. The image of an older woman, sharp-eyed, with streaks of silver in her hair, crystallized. But extinction is more than just a physical elimination. It's the loss of potential, of possibility. The holographic display began to show a series of intricate simulations. Jack watched as entire civilizations were mapped, their potential trajectories calculated with mathematical precision. It wasn't about winning a war. It was about ensuring the continuation of knowledge, of potential, of hope. "Most species fight to survive," Zara commented, her tone carrying a weight of ancient wisdom. "Humans designed a method to survive by becoming something more than just survivors." The simulation showed how human strategists had created a living network. Genetic markers were carefully distributed across multiple species and worlds. Information repositories were hidden in the most unexpected places. Cultural knowledge was encoded in ways that could survive even the most catastrophic events. Jack's mind struggled to comprehend the scale of the plan. Each seemingly random placement of humans throughout the galaxy was actually a carefully calculated node in a vast living network. Mining stations, research outposts, diplomatic missions, they were all part of a larger design. "Your ancestors understood something fundamental," Zara continued. "Survival is not about strength, it's about adaptability, potential, the ability to respond to challenges that haven't even been imagined yet." More memories surfaced. Jack saw the original architects of the plan, men and women who looked at the imminent destruction of human civilization not as an end, but as an opportunity for radical reimagining. They didn't just want humans to survive. They wanted to ensure that the essence of human potential would continue to exist, to grow, to influence. The holographic display shifted, showing how human genetic markers had been subtly integrated into various alien species over generations. Not through conquest, but through careful, strategic placement. Cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, diplomatic missions. We were creating a living database. The memory of the silver-haired woman continued, not just of genetic information, but of potential, of possibility. Jack's hands trembled as he reached out, almost touching the holographic projections. Each point of light represented a carefully placed individual, a node in a network that spanned entire star systems. His own placement on the mining station was not random. It was a specific, calculated position. Zara watched him carefully. "You're beginning to understand," she said. "But understanding is just the first step." The holographic display began to show more recent projections, potential future scenarios that depended on the activation of these hidden networks. Crisis points where the carefully placed nodes could shift entire galactic dynamics. "We didn't just preserve humanity," the memory continued. "We created a system of potential, a living, adaptive network that could respond to challenges we couldn't even imagine." Jack looked at Zara, his perception of reality fundamentally shifting. He was no longer just a maintenance worker on a remote mining station. He was part of something far larger, a living strategy that had been generations in the making. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice a mixture of wonder and trepidation. Zara's luminescent form seemed to smile. "Now," she said, "you begin to understand your true purpose." The genetic research laboratory gleamed with an antiseptic precision that felt almost alien. Jack sat in the center of a complex array of scanning equipment, his body connected to devices that looked more like art installations than scientific instruments. Zara stood nearby, her luminescent form casting soft patterns across the sterile white walls. Dr. Rodriguez moved between holographic displays, her professional demeanor replaced by a mixture of scientific excitement and profound disbelief. "These genetic markers," she muttered, manipulating three-dimensional DNA structures that twisted and turned in midair, "they're not just adaptive. They're alive." Jack watched as strands of his own genetic code transformed before his eyes. What appeared to be standard human DNA revealed intricate layers of complexity, hidden sequences that seemed to pulse with an intelligence of their own. Each marker was more than just genetic information. They were living repositories of knowledge, strategically placed and waiting to be activated. "Your ancestors did more than preserve genetic information," Zara explained, her telepathic voice weaving through Jack's thoughts. "They created a living network. Each genetic marker is a node, a potential carrier of critical information and adaptive capabilities." Memories began to surface. Jack saw glimpses of genetic research facilities hidden across multiple star systems. Scientists working in secret, developing a method of preservation that went far beyond traditional understanding of genetics. They weren't just protecting human DNA. They were creating a distributed intelligence system that could survive and adapt across generations. Dr. Rodriguez's hands moved rapidly across the holographic interface. These markers contain compressed information networks. It's like each of your cells is a microscopic data storage and processing unit. She paused, her scientific language failing to capture the true marvel of the discovery. "You're not just carrying genetic information, you're carrying potential." The genetic display shifted, showing how Jack's DNA contained carefully integrated markers from multiple alien species. Not through random mutation, but through deliberate strategic design. Each marker was a bridge, a connection point between human potential and the broader galactic ecosystem. Survival was never about physical preservation. Zara continued. It was about creating a network of potential, a living, adaptive system that could respond to challenges we couldn't even imagine. Jack watched as his genetic code revealed layers of hidden capabilities, enhanced cognitive processing, adaptive immune responses that could integrate knowledge from multiple biological systems, communication pathways that went beyond traditional understanding of genetics. Your body is a living archive. The memory of a genetic researcher spoke in his mind. Each cell is a potential activation point for critical information and adaptive strategies. The laboratory's instruments began to respond to Jack's changing genetic state. Holographic displays flickered, showing potential activation sequences. It was as if his very DNA was a complex communication network, waiting to be fully understood. Dr. Rodriguez looked up, her scientific skepticism battling with the impossible evidence before her. These genetic markers are responding to something, she said. They're not just passive. They're communicating. Zara moved closer, her luminescent form casting no shadow. You are becoming aware of your true nature, she said. A living node in a network designed to preserve and protect potential across entire civilizations. Jack's perception of himself began to fundamentally shift. He was no longer just a maintenance worker on a remote mining station. He was a critical point in a vast, living network of genetic potential. Each of his cells contained layers of information and adaptive capabilities that went far beyond traditional understanding of human biology. What does this mean? Jack asked, his voice a mixture of wonder and trepidation. Zara's eyes held a depth of knowledge that seemed to span entire civilizations. It means, she said, that your true purpose is just beginning to reveal itself. The genetic display continued to pulse and transform, a living testament to humanity's most extraordinary strategy of survival. Not through force, not through destruction, but through potential, through the ability to adapt, to connect, to preserve the essence of intelligent life across the vast, complex tapestry of the universe. Jack Reyes, maintenance worker, genetic anomaly, living network node, sat at the center of a discovery that would change everything. The observation deck of the research station offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding star system. Soft ambient lighting reflected off the curved windows, creating an illusion of infinite space. Jack stood beside Zara, watching distant stars pulse with an almost rhythmic quality that seemed to echo the complex genetic networks now awakening within him. The luminari were never meant to be just passive recipients. Zara began, her luminescent form casting intricate patterns across the deck's polished surface. Your human strategists understood something fundamental about galactic dynamics that no other species had comprehended. Holographic displays materialized around them, showing the intricate web of interactions between human strategic nodes and various galactic civilizations. Jack watched, mesmerized, as lines of connection revealed themselves, subtle influences that had shaped entire civilizations without their conscious awareness. A memory surfaced, a conference room filled with strategists discussing something called adaptive influence networks. The silver-haired woman from his previous memories stood at the center, her voice calm and precise. "We're not creating an empire," she had said. "We're creating a stabilizing mechanism for galactic development." Zara's telepathic explanation wove through Jack's thoughts. The Luminari, a species of extraordinary technological advancement, had been unknowingly guided by subtle human interventions. Not through direct conquest or obvious manipulation, but through carefully placed strategic points of influence. Your species understood that true preservation wasn't about domination, Zara continued. It was about creating balance, preventing systemic collapse. The holographic display showed how human strategic nodes had been integrated into luminary scientific research, diplomatic networks, and cultural development centers. Each placement was a precision instrument of potential, a way to prevent catastrophic mistakes and guide evolutionary development. Jack saw glimpses of critical moments. A luminary research project that was about to take a potentially destructive turn, subtly redirected by a human researcher embedded deep within their scientific community. A diplomatic crisis averted by a seemingly insignificant communication adjustment. Entire planetary development trajectories gently nudged toward more sustainable paths. We didn't even know we were being guided, Zara admitted, a hint of something like respect in her telepathic voice. Your species became masters of indirect influence. The memories continued to unfold. Generations of carefully placed human individuals, each carrying genetic and cultural markers that could activate at precise moments. Not as conquerors, but as subtle guardians of potential. Dr. Rodriguez's voice echoed from earlier genetic research. It's not about controlling, she had said. It's about creating possibility. Jack watched as the holographic display revealed the true complexity of the strategy. Humans had transformed from a seemingly defeated species into the architects of galactic stability, not through military might, but through an unprecedented understanding of systemic development. The luminary were one of many, Zara explained. But your species saw us as more than just another civilization to be managed. You saw potential, possibility. More memories surfaced, collaborative research projects, diplomatic exchanges, subtle interventions that prevented systemic collapses across multiple civilizations. The human strategy was less about survival and more about creating a framework for collective advancement. We didn't just preserve ourselves. The memory of the silver-haired strategist spoke. We created a method of preserving potential across entire galactic ecosystems. Jack's understanding continued to expand. The luminary connection was just one thread in a vast, intricate network of strategic interventions. Each civilization touched by human influence had been gently guided, never controlled, toward more stable developmental paths. Zara turned to Jack, her luminescent form seeming to contain entire universes of knowledge. You are beginning to understand, she said, but understanding is only the first step. The observation deck's windows seemed to pulse with the same rhythmic quality as the genetic networks within Jack. Distant stars continued their ancient dance, unaware of the complex strategies that had been quietly shaping their potential for generations. What happens next? Jack asked, his voice a mixture of wonder and anticipation. Zara's response carried the weight of countless civilizations. Now, she said, you become an active node in the network. The training chamber hummed with a subtle energy that seemed to vibrate just beyond the edge of normal perception. Jack stood at its center, surrounded by holographic interfaces that responded to thoughts he was only beginning to understand. Zara watched from the periphery, her luminescent form a constant, guiding presence. Potential is not a destination, she had explained earlier. It is a continuous state of becoming. Jack's mind began to perceive connections that had always existed, but remained invisible. Complex systems that once seemed random now revealed themselves as intricate networks of possibility. The maintenance station where he had worked for years was no longer just a structure of metal and machinery. It was a living system with countless interconnected potentials. A series of holographic displays materialized around him, each representing a different cognitive challenge. Mathematical projections danced alongside complex strategic simulations. cultural interaction models twisted and transformed, showing potential outcomes of diplomatic exchanges that spanned entire star systems. Dr. Rodriguez's voice echoed in his memory. Your neural pathways are creating connections we've never seen before. It's like your brain is learning to process information on multiple simultaneous levels. Jack reached out, not physically, but with something deeper. A thought. A possibility. The holographic displays began to respond, shifting and transforming based on his unspoken intentions. Complex equations solved themselves. Strategic simulations revealed hidden pathways of potential resolution. You are learning to see beyond immediate perception, Zara explained. Humans always had this potential. Most just never activated it. Memories continued to surface. Not just his own memories, but collective experiences encoded within his genetic network. He saw strategic meetings from generations past. Moments of critical decision-making that had shaped entire civilizations. Each memory was a living repository of knowledge and potential. The training chamber's walls seemed to breathe with possibility. Jack understood now that his previous life, the maintenance worker, the seemingly insignificant individual, was just a carefully constructed shell. A protective mechanism that had kept his true potential hidden until the right moment. Activation is not about power, Zara continued. It's about understanding, about seeing the interconnected nature of potential. Jack's perception expanded. He could now see the maintenance station as a complex living system. Every pipe, every electrical conduit, every mechanical interface became a node in a broader network of possibility. The station was no longer just a place of work. It was a microcosm of potential interactions. Strategic simulations played out in his mind. Not just military strategies, but complex social, economic, and cultural interactions. He saw how a single communication could redirect entire planetary development trajectories. How a seemingly minor technological intervention could prevent systemic collapses. Your ancestors understood something fundamental. The memory of the silver-haired strategist spoke. Potential is not about individual capability, it's about systemic understanding. The holographic displays began to respond to Jack's evolving consciousness. Complex models of galactic interactions twisted and transformed. Potential crisis points revealed themselves, along with subtle intervention strategies that could prevent catastrophic outcomes. Zara moved closer, her luminescent form casting no shadow. You are becoming, she said, not just an individual, but a living node in a vast network of potential. Jack's understanding continued to expand. He saw how human strategic nodes had been carefully placed across multiple civilizations. Not as conquerors, not as controllers, but as subtle guardians of possibility. Each individual carried the potential to redirect, to understand, to prevent systemic failures. The training chamber pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to echo the complex genetic networks within Jack. Distant stars continued their ancient dance, unaware of the intricate strategies that had been quietly shaping their potential for generations. What am I becoming? Jack asked, his voice a mixture of wonder and anticipation. Zara's response carried the weight of countless civilizations. A guardian of potential, she said. A living bridge between what is and what could be. The holographic displays continued to dance around Jack, revealing layers of possibility that had always existed but remained unseen. His perception expanded, transforming from a maintenance worker into something far more complex. A living node in a vast, interconnected network of galactic potential. The Galactic Council chamber stretched before Jack like an architectural marvel of impossible geometry. Hundreds of delegates from various species filled the circular amphitheatre, their forms ranging from crystalline beings to energy constructs, from silicon-based life forms to entities that defied traditional biological classification. Zara stood beside him, her luminescent form a subtle contrast to the chamber's austere magnificence. "This is more than a political gathering," she whispered telepathically. "This is a moment of potential transformation." Jack's newly awakened capabilities allowed him to perceive the chamber in ways no other participant could. Each delegate became a complex network of potential interactions. Political alliances transformed from simple diplomatic connections to intricate webs of systemic dependencies. He could see the hidden tensions, the unspoken conflicts, the delicate balance that kept galactic civilization from fragmenting. The current speaker, a crystalline diplomat from the Vex Confederation, presented a standard report on interstellar resource management. To most observers, it was a routine presentation. To Jack, it was a carefully constructed narrative hiding multiple layers of systemic manipulation. "Your species always understood something fundamental," Zara explained. "Diplomacy is not about direct confrontation. It's about understanding potential trajectories." Memories of human strategic meetings surfaced. The silver-haired strategist's voice echoed in his mind. "We don't change systems by fighting them. We change them by understanding their fundamental dynamics." Jack's intervention would not be a dramatic moment of conflict. Instead, it would be a subtle redirection, a carefully placed insight that would transform the entire trajectory of the discussion. As the Vex diplomat continued speaking, Jack began to activate the network of strategic nodes he now understood were carefully placed throughout the chamber. Not through obvious communication, but through a complex web of subtle influence. A luminary delegate shifted slightly. A representative from the Quantum Collective adjusted their communication interface. Minute changes that would be imperceptible to most became the first threads of a comprehensive systemic transformation. Diplomacy is quantum. The memory of a human strategist spoke. Each interaction changes the entire system. The chamber's holographic displays began to shift almost imperceptibly. Complex data streams revealed alternative potential trajectories that no single species had previously comprehended. Jack was not controlling the narrative. He was expanding its potential. Zara watched with a mixture of anticipation and respect. "Your species understood that true influence is about possibility," she said, "not about direct control." The Vex diplomat's presentation continued, unaware that its fundamental premises were being subtly challenged. Jack's intervention was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about revealing possibilities that had been overlooked. Quantum probability models began to reshape themselves. Resource allocation strategies transformed. Diplomatic tension points dissolved and reformed into more cooperative configurations. "We are not here to conquer," the memory of the silver-haired strategist repeated. "We are here to prevent systemic collapse." Jack's genetic network, the living repository of strategic knowledge, began to interface with the chamber's complex communication systems. Not through invasion, but through subtle resonance. Each genetic marker was a potential point of systemic understanding. The delegates began to perceive new possibilities. Not through direct communication, but through a fundamental shift in systemic perception. Jack was not changing their minds. He was expanding their potential understanding. "Transformation is not about force," Zara continued. "It's about revealing potential." The chamber continued its formal proceedings. To an outside observer, nothing significant had changed, but the entire systemic trajectory had been subtly redirected. Potential conflicts were being dissolved before they could fully form. Resource allocation strategies were transforming into more cooperative models. Jack understood now that his role was not about individual achievement. It was about being a living node in a vast network of potential transformation. What happens next? He asked Zara, his perception continuing to expand. Her response carried the weight of countless potential futures. Now, she said, we begin to implement the next phase of potential. The Galactic Council Chamber continued its proceedings, unaware that a fundamental transformation was already underway, guided by the subtle, almost imperceptible influence of a single human who had become something far more than an individual. The quantum communication hub pulsed with an energy that defied traditional understanding of space and time. Jack stood at its center, no longer just an individual, but a living nexus of potential and strategic possibility. Zara remained nearby, her luminescent form a constant reminder of the intricate connections that spanned entire civilizations. Restoration is not about returning to a previous state, she explained, her telepathic voice weaving through the complex neural networks surrounding them. It's about creating a new framework of potential. Holographic displays materialized, showing the complex web of interventions that had been carefully placed over generations. Each point of light represented a strategic node, a moment of potential transformation that had been waiting, almost imperceptibly, to activate. Jack's perception expanded. He could see the entire trajectory of human strategic intervention, not as a linear narrative, but as a complex, multi-dimensional network of possibility. The seemingly random placement of human individuals across various civilizations revealed itself as a meticulously designed system of preservation and potential. Memories continued to surface, not just his own, but the collective experiences of generations of strategic thinkers. The silver-haired strategist's voice echoed with crystalline clarity. "We are not saving ourselves," she had said. "We are creating a framework for collective survival." The quantum communication hub began to resonate with Jack's expanded consciousness. Communication pathways that had been dormant for generations began to activate. Not as a sudden burst of information, but as a subtle, almost organic expansion of possibility. "Your species understood something fundamental," Zara continued. "Survival is not about individual preservation. It's about systemic potential." Jack watched as entire diplomatic networks began to transform. Resource allocation strategies reshaped themselves. Conflict resolution models evolved into more cooperative frameworks. The changes were so subtle that most civilizations would not even recognize the fundamental shift occurring. Genetic markers that had been carefully distributed across multiple species began to activate, not as a form of control, but as living repositories of strategic understanding. Each marker was a potential point of systemic transformation. The memory of a human genetic researcher surfaced. "We're not creating a weapon," the researcher had explained. "We're creating a living system of potential preservation." Zara moved closer, her form casting no shadow, but containing entire universes of potential. "You are the culmination of a strategy generations in the making," she said. "Not a conqueror, not a savior, a guardian of potential." The quantum communication hub continued to pulse. Jack could see how human strategic nodes had been carefully placed to prevent systemic collapses across multiple civilizations. Each intervention was a subtle nudge, a way of revealing potential pathways that had previously remained invisible. "We didn't just preserve our own species," the memory of the strategic meeting continued. "We created a method of preserving collective potential." Holographic displays revealed the true complexity of the intervention. Diplomatic crises averted. Technological developments guided toward more sustainable paths. Cultural exchanges that prevented systemic misunderstandings. Each intervention was a delicate dance of possibility. Jack understood now that his journey was not about individual achievement. He was a living node in a vast network of potential transformation, a bridge between what had been and what could be. "What is our ultimate purpose?" Jack asked, his perception continuing to expand. Zara's response carried the weight of countless potential futures. "To prevent systemic collapse," she said. "To reveal potential. To create a framework of collective survival." The quantum communication hub reached a moment of critical transformation. Diplomatic networks began to reshape themselves. Resource allocation strategies evolved. Conflict resolution models transformed into more cooperative frameworks. To an outside observer, nothing significant had changed, but the entire trajectory of galactic development had been subtly redirected. Jack was no longer just Jack Reyes, maintenance worker for a remote mining station. He had become something far more complex, a living repository of strategic potential, a guardian of collective possibility. The distant stars continued their ancient dance, unaware of the intricate strategies that had been quietly shaping their potential for generations. Zara looked at Jack, a hint of something like pride in her telepathic communication. "Welcome," she said, "to the next phase of potential." The quantum communication hub pulsed one final time, a subtle heartbeat of possibility that would continue to reshape civilizations for generations to come.